Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sal, and today we're going to be doing another NBA Daily Fantasy Sports little strategy video for you guys. Today, this one's going to be on lineup construction, how you should optimally construct your lineup, because if you're not doing these simple tasks or keeping them in mind, you're probably just burning your money. So if you're new here to this channel, again, my name is Sal Vetri, and I cover daily fantasy sports in the NFL streets, NBA right now, and what will be the MLB streets. We cover all these things, and I try and give you as much value as possible, whether it's giving you data on the days of the actual slates for NBA or whatever the sport might be, or if it's giving you these types of strategy videos. I want to give you an overwhelming amount of value, get your viewership, keep you guys tuned in. That'll help me on my end, help you guys on your end. So it's just sort of this great mutual relationship. The community is growing. So I appreciate it if you get any value throughout this video, whether you're a returning subscriber, you know how much I appreciate you, or if you're new here, welcome. If you could hit that thumbs up button, and if you could also hit the subscribe button if you do get value and you are new here. Drop down in the comments below. Let me know what you like most about these videos, and also give me feedback. What do you want to know more about? What more strategy videos would you like to see? I'm all about making those, pounding them out quickly for you guys, and giving you sort of this online book or toolkit to improve your daily fantasy game for pretty much free, right? Or is free on YouTube for you guys. So what we're going to be talking about today in this video is lineup construction in the NBA DFS streets. We're going to be looking at it from a DraftKings perspective. I will throw out some FanDuel and Yahoo tips, potentially more so FanDuel, but we're going to be mainly looking at it from DraftKings, the most popular site, the most that you can do with lineup constructions due to a lot of dual eligibility slots for the guys. What's going on, Shep? How you doing, my man? I got to get you on the Twitch streams, man. You got to get on there. So if you're wondering, YouTube, there's a little plug for Twitch. We're streaming live right now on Twitch. It's a streaming platform. It allows creators to pretty much just make more money because there's subscriptions and things like that. But it also allows me to get a streaming platform out, talk, be interactive with the community, which was my main objective, answer questions, because daily fantasy sports is daily, and it's better if I can answer questions on a live stream, and then get those up to YouTube for you guys, and then maybe onto the podcast. So make sure to come over to Twitch. It's down below, and you can see up above, if you are a Twitch subscriber, I think it's like $5 a month, you do get my player projection sheets. Again, this is something that was just completely, people were just subscribing for $5 because they wanted to support me and getting nothing. So I figured I'd make the player projection sheets. You'll get access to all that, so make sure to check it out. So what we're going to talk about for lineup construction, I just pretty much have a document on my other laptop here. I'm going to just pull right off of there some of the things that came up to my mind and I thought about when trying to create this sort of video. So what we want to start with is your game selection, right? That matters if you're playing a cash game or GPP. And if you don't know what cash or GPP is, I have a video on that. Go find it, watch it quickly, and then come back. But cash games are basically 50-50s or head-to-heads. GPPs are your tournaments, guaranteed prize pool. And which one are you playing? Because that's going to set up how you build your lineups just in terms of an overall framework. If you're going to be playing cash games, you want to have more minutes, more players with secure minutes, a higher floor for your lineups. Your value is going to be 4x the salary plus 10. GPPs, you want around 6x the value on average. In GPPs, you can take a little bit more risks, guys who maybe are just a little bit not as great of plays, but they have lower ownership, things like that we'll get to. So should you use a core is a question that I get a lot, or do you use a core? In terms of cash games, my lineup is all the same lineup. I make one lineup. If you make more than that, maybe you can get away with two, but I would say make one, because if you're making more than that, you're leveraging against yourself, right? You're putting more players in your lineups and you're making multiple lineups. So potentially you're going to be playing your own players. Maybe not head to head. You'll never play yourself head to head. You shouldn't be setting it up like that unless you have two accounts, which is fraudulent. But if you're not playing yourself head to head, you're playing other people with the same players, and it's just kind of counteracting. You can't get an edge on people. You can't just blow up with two separate lineups because you can't get all those same players into both of the lineups. That's why I just stick to one lineup. I have all my leverage in that. And context selection, all that stuff is in another NBA DFS strategy video. So in terms of a core, I just build one lineup for cash, but if we're talking GPPs, I think if you're entering a ton of lineups, if you're entering 20 plus or you're entering 150, 50 max, whatever it might be, I think it's more so not a core, but it's a player pool of around 50 players for DraftKings, 40 to 50 for DraftKings, 50 to 60 for FanDuel. FanDuel, it's because you have that drop score player, so it allows you to be a little bit more risky, get more risky plays into the player pool. If you're only entering 1 to 3 lineups, a single entry, obviously it's going to be similar to cash. You're entering one lineup. If it's a 3 max, yeah, I think having a core of like 4 players is pretty solid, and then just trying to get the other guys right in there, or rotating the other guys around. So that's just the way that I would go about that. So that's simple stuff. Cash is just straightforward, one lineup, increase your floor minutes. Obviously, you want still upside. In an NBA, we've talked about it before. Tournaments to cash lineups, you can enter your cash lineups into tournaments and feel good about them hitting. Whereas sports like the NFL and some other sports, you really can't do that and feel confident about setting yourself apart. You can kind of do that in NBA because we do have a lot of upside and a ton of players because there's just a ton more players going at it night in and night out that have that sort of upside. Whereas in the NFL, it's like one receiver per team. So now when we get into specifics, a big thing that I like to look at and that you should be looking at, whether you're watching this on Twitch or whether you're on YouTube, and this is good for all levels, is to make sure that you're reinforcing and trying to get the guys who have the bonus upside, double-doubles for rebounds, double-doubles for points and assists, rebounds and assists. So you want to get as many centers, at least I like to do this, in your lineup as possible, and you could potentially roster 4 centers, right? The center position, the utility spot, the forward, and the power forward. A lot of centers count both ways, so if we just go over to forwards or if we just go over to centers here, if you wanted to build a lineup, and again, you're going to have to probably find some value in here, but you can get guys into that spot. Al Horford's always cheap, and he always is rostered as a power forward. You should always roster Al Horford as a power forward because he's a center, and he's going to be getting the double-double upside, the easier to the rim baskets. That's why we like centers. They're going to be shooting from 2 feet away. They have block upside. They have more rebound upside, easier rebounds too, than a guy like a power forward. So if you're putting him in there over a power forward, you're probably getting a boost if it's in the same price range. And then you could do similar things. So obviously for the center position, you want to get a guy who's only center eligible in there. You don't want to waste one of your power forward spots. So if you threw Joel Embiid in there, now you go back to the center position, how many can you get in this lineup, right? And the guys who are power forward center eligible are the nuts, right? So Kevin Love, you have here, if he gets to start at center, you can get him in there. You already have 3 centers in your lineup. Now you don't have to go every single lineup, and I don't do this either by any means. It's really hard to get 4 centers in your lineup. But if you're getting 2 to 3, that's a pretty good start, especially if you're getting 2 to 3 who have a lot of upside in terms of minutes. The same can be said for point guards. And we can kind of tackle the utility spot. The utility spot, what I like to roster here, and what the majority of people roster, if you go over on Fantasy Labs and you just look at the free tool on utility, you can see how the percentage of people that rostered a specific position that night. It's mainly centers, point guards, power forwards. Why? Well, power forwards double count as centers like we just went over. Centers are the nuts. Everybody loves them. And point guards, because point guards, similar to centers, are going to get a ton of usage because they have the ball in their hands. They're controlling the offense. They're going to get assist upsides, driving to the basket for easy shots, and easier assists if it's in transition, things like that. I like centers a little bit more, but I guess the biggest tip here for lineup constructions, never, or not never, because I've done it before and it actually hit for me. Lou Williams in the utility spot, but he's more of a point guard coming off the bench. It's really different. But really, you should be prioritizing those centers, forwards, point guards in that utility spot. It's not a cut and dry, but it's if you practice it over a long term, it'll probably be more beneficial, especially in cash. In tournaments, yeah, throw a shooting guard in there if you want to differentiate your lineup. That's a good way to do it. Not a lot of people will be doing that. The ones that are probably doing it without knowing they're doing it, and they already have a pretty bad lineup. So in terms of shooting guards, I wouldn't be throwing them, small forwards, I wouldn't be throwing them in there because they just don't have that big ceiling game upside. And if they do, then just put them in your normal spot and get some of those centers and point guards and power forwards into the utility. So next up, we can talk about FanDuel. FanDuel position scarcity. I mentioned how you're going to get a couple more guys in there because of that drop player. It's a little bit different lineup construction on FanDuel because each position is very scarce, right? You have to play a specific position. You don't have guys dual position where you can pretty much build any lineup you want with all the players for the most part. Sometimes you run into issues on Draftkings. FanDuel, you have to play a small forward in the small forward spot. They're not dual eligible. So what that means is depending on the night is how you're going to be building your lineups. If there's a small forward by the name of, say, Giannis, who's the only good option, and the rest of the guys on that slate are literally terrible. Like, you don't even want to roster any of them. But Giannis isn't the best pay-up option overall on the night. Then that's where President comes in, and you kind of have to roster, you feel more inclined, at least in cash and probably tournaments, to roster Giannis because there's just nothing else below him. The opportunity cost is so immense, the drop between Giannis and the next small forward on FanDuel compared to the drop between maybe a top-tier point guard and then the next guy over. So that's just an example, not a or maybe a specific one, but not a real one, just something that I'm trying to use for the content here. So late swap. So late swap's huge. So well, a couple of things with late swap. The first thing with late swap is you want every single one of your players playing later in the day to be in these bottom 3 spots, right? You want as much flexibility as you can get throughout the day. So utility goes here, Forward goes here, guard goes here, obviously. And then you want to make sure that if you're playing a guy in the Golden State game, make sure that guy in the Golden State game, if it's Steph Curry, isn't in your shooting guard or point guard spot here. Make sure that he's in your utility or guard spot down here. And another way that's interesting, if you do have, say, you're playing for some reason, which you Clay, you're going to be playing Clay and Steph, and your utility spot's already full with a guy from this Lakers game. We can just fill it all in, for example. So we want a Laker, take off them. Say you have LeBron in the utility spot. Draftkings is just so awful with that stuff. All right, so to say you have LeBron in the utility spot, this is how you should set this up, right? LeBron's the most expensive, so he's the most flexibility. You want a late swap because if your lineup's doing bad, you want to set yourself up to be different. If you have a chalky lineup, a lot of high-owned players, you have to start taking risks if you're already trending downward because you're not going to be able to pass as much people because they have similar lineups. So maybe here you come off of LeBron James, and based on the way your lineup's built and you would have money left over, say, you can go down to Kuzma, right? So much money left over, but you have no chance of winning if you keep LeBron, and you might as well hope that Kuzma outscores LeBron, which on most nights won't happen, but you're not going to win anyway, so you might as well give yourself that opportunity. But the basics to late swapping, the guys in the later games should be going in these bottom three spots because it's more flexible. You can switch them out later on DraftKings. Obviously, FanDuel late swap's not there. That's why I stay away from FanDuel for the most part. Turn off those sounds. And then you want to make sure that your most expensive guy in those later games is in the utility spot so you have more flexibility. If you're playing guys like Clay and Steph, put Clay in the shooting guard spot or the point guard. Well, he's not point guard, but put him in the shooting guard spot over the guard spot because he's cheaper. You get more wiggle room with a guy like Steph. You can, in these 4 later games, with a guy like Steph, you can switch him out for Chris Paul. Whereas with Clay, if you had Clay down here, you wouldn't be able to because you would have no money left, most likely. So that's just what late swap is at a high level for the NBA. You got to make sure that you're doing all of that. You got to make sure that you're keeping it in mind. And if you really can't late swap throughout the day, and it does come into effect a lot. You're losing money, you're burning money. So make sure that the nights you're playing, there is late swap time for you to check your phone or whatever it might be. At least check the injury news updates. That's the main thing you're going to be looking for. Next up, we have, I already mentioned it, avoid the shooting guard. I wrote down twice. That's how much I care about it. Avoid the shooting guard and even the small forward in the utility spot. There's not much upside there. And I guess the reason I don't like shooting guards just in general, like obviously you have to play one, but I always try, and this is another huge tip. You have a guy like Steph Curry who's point guard and shooting guard eligible. I'll always put him in the shooting guard position. Shooting guards have very limited upside because they don't get a lot of peripherals. At least most of them don't, right? Think about Klay Thompson, great real-life player. He's only going to score the ball. He doesn't get a ton of assists. He gets some rebounds, but he's only going to score the ball. He really doesn't dribble the ball that much in the games, and you really need him to go for a 30 to 40-plus point pure scoring night for him to do anything for you. So I'd rather get Steph Curry or even a guy in Clay's price range that's also point guard eligible, maybe a Thomas Satoransky, something like that, because they have the assists upside. They might get rebounds, just double upside, more points. Overall, there's just a bigger ceiling there and honestly a bigger floor. So I always try and get shooting guards who are actually point guards, even sometimes if they're small forwards, that helps. If they're power forwards and they're small forward eligible, which a lot of people are, I try and put my power forwards in small forward spot. I try and get as many centers, point guards, and power forwards in my lineup. That's pretty much as simple as I can explain it. I just don't like having shooting guards in there. I think that they don't have any upside really, for the most part. So the next thing for lineup construction is it's going to be slate specific. You have to understand the slate, and I don't know this slate yet because it's not for 2 more days. We're on the NBA All-Star break here in 2019, but you have to understand, is it stars and scrubs? Is there enough viable value? Not guys that you're trying to squeeze in. You don't just come down here and you go, oh, he's only 3,400, Evan Turner. How many points does he score? Oh, he scored 27 last time? I'm going to throw him in. That's the exact thing that people do, and that's the exact way you burn all your money. Evan Turner is an absolute bum for the most part. Yeah, you see this 20 burger, you see this 21. 21's not going to get you there in a tournament or even cash. But then look at this, 10, 13, 15, 19. What has he done for you lately is not what he's probably going to be doing for you. Keep that in mind. If he lets you get up to Giannis in this lineup, I don't think I like that. Again, it depends on the rest of the slate, but the value opens up. But if your value is Evan Turner, this is a guy who can literally go out there and score 10 points for you. Even if Giannis goes for a 65 burger, that's 75 combined out of these guys. Whereas you can get probably 2 guys in the 7K range that can both have 50-point upside, just as much as Evan Turner has 20-point upside, right? So that's just knowing whether it's stars and scrub or whether you're forcing it. Don't force it. Going balanced is usually a good approach, right? Most of the guys in that 6 to 8K range have 50-point ceilings, have very viable 40-point upside. Obviously, the guys at the top have the 80-point ceilings, very viable 50 to 60-point upside, just as in terms of what you can rely on them for. But if you're pairing that with a guy who's absolute dust, it's not good. Obviously, if there's news later in the day where a cheap guy opens up and he's a great value, he's going to get a lot of minutes, he's a point guard even, that's great. But don't be just trying to dig down in the dumpster down there for anything to try and pair him with something. You can't force stars and scrubs. If you're forcing stars and scrubs with dust at the bottom, you're going to burn your money. It's as simple as that. So understand the slate. Another one is understand how to late swap. We already talked about that, putting the guys down below. And when you should be late swapping is if you realize, and it's not cut and dry, it's if you realize, oh shit, I don't have a lot of minutes left, or I don't have enough minutes left to jump some of these other guys. This one guy in my lineup dudded. If a guy in your lineup duds and you built a chalky build, it's probably time to late swap. That's just the way it is. If you're entering a lot of lineups, use a late swap global trader. There's the late swaptimizer, I think, from Fantasy Cruncher. All good tools that I've seen in use. I've never personally used, but I've seen videos on them, things like that. And I know some pretty credible people in the industry who do use them and swear by them. A couple more things just on lineup construction. I mean, the main things are get power forwards, point guards, and centers, mainly power forwards and centers if you can get those in the utility spot. For me personally, into your lineup, understand the slate. And another thing is you got to make sure that you're going to be at your desks between 6 and 7. This is more of a high strategy thing, but that's when all the news breaks. And also throughout the night, have alerts on your phone when the news drops. Because if a guy's late swapped out in the 10:30 game and you're not changing him out of your lineup, you could be in the lead all night, take a goose egg, and now you're not even in the money. So that's definitely huge. That's just a tip put on mobile alerts from Fantasy Labs. Another thing is for the, and probably a big thing to mention, is game stacking. So we see game stacking with wide receivers, 2 wide receivers and an opposing player in the NFL. In terms of basketball, it's pretty much making sure that you're getting 2 guys on each team, potentially 3 guys on one team, 2 on the other, even more if you want. A lot of people understand game stacking. They don't do it right. Either one, they're targeting the wrong games. They're just targeting the wrong players. They don't have enough exposure to specific players. Know the guys who are good to game stack together. Usually guys who are going to be running on the floor at the same time. They're assisting each other's baskets. Somehow Russell Westbrook and Paul George are great game stacking options. Now it's a little harder since their prices are both up, and mainly Paul George's price is up so high. But guys that are on the floor or on the court at the same time, and if you're not going to be doing something like that, get a guy like Lou Williams who absolutely runs the second team for the Clippers. Game stack him with some of the first team options. A guy like Harrell if he's starting. A guy like maybe not Gilchrist-Alexander. You don't want to be game stacking guys who are both guards or point guards because they can take away from each other if they're on this first unit especially. But make sure you're game stacking properly. Correlations and things matter. Run it back with people on the other side. Don't just be forcing in bums to game stack as well. It's the same exact thing with stars and scrubs. You want to make sure you have a balanced approach, or there's value that you're stacking with some of the stars on the other side. Game stacking is not just playing 2 players from a game. 3 is even probably thin. For the NBA, you need about 4 or 5. If the game goes to overtime, Yahtzee, you're going to win all the money probably. Probably not. But that's just game stacking at a high level. Just playing players from those games. And that's lineup construction 101, I guess, for the NBA, as much as I could just fit into this video quickly. We're going to be making another video right after this. It's coming out tomorrow on Wednesday. It's going to be NBA contrarian approach, how to be contrarian in the NBA. There's a full guide on being contrarian down below. There's probably a little banner here or somewhere by my name that says free PDF down below. That's very good. It's focused around the NFL, but it translates right over to the NBA for the most part. And we'll be covering the NBA tomorrow. In terms of being contrarian, that video will be up on YouTube for sure. So if you have any questions, if you made it all the way through this video, before you head out, can you please like it? That's all I want to ask from you guys. And if you're new here, please subscribe. Approaching 3,000 subs. I'd love to crush through that. We're going to have a $3,000 or $3,000. We're going to have a 3,000, wish I had $3,000 to give away. 3,000 sub giveaway when the time comes. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. My name is Sal. You already know that. Peace out, YouTube.